guys, I'm Amrit and today I'm being featured on Car and Me. I'm going to tell you about why I absolutely love classic cars. So my passion for cars started from my father for sure, as is the case with a lot of, I think, young classic car fans in Sri Lanka. My father was a huge influence on my life in terms of cars. When I was born, actually, the first piece of clothing I ever wore had a little yellow car on it. There's pictures of me the day I was born. And I think that's definitely where my passion started from. My father and my uncle are both classic car enthusiasts and used to race also back in the day. And yeah, that's definitely, I'd say, where my classic car passion began from. So I'm currently based in Australia, but I come here, visit many times a year. I work in real estate finance in Australia, and I also have a filmmaking business on the side, making marketing films. This is how I actually pay for how I help to pay for my classic car addiction. I love, in Australia I've got two cars. I have a Ford Falcon XR6, which is an Australian car. It's made in Melbourne, where I'm living, and I also have a Mercedes W123 Coupe there, which is, we actually have the same car over here. My brother has the same car here, and I worked on that restoration myself with the help of one of my friends, and it took us about 6 months, and we finally put it on the road. And that's what I love about classic cars, is when they work, there's the greatest happiness in the world when we finally get them going. Sri Lanka, I also do filmmaking here. I have a YouTube channel and Instagram channel called the Alles Trail, and it's mostly about cars and travel. And I love traveling around here, making content for that, and they definitely complement the channel very well because people love seeing them. And that's the difference between, I see at least, between new cars and classic cars, is people really respect and love classic cars when they see them on the road. They don't necessarily look like you're showing off or you're this thing. They like to see you covered in sweat, you know, flexing your muscles, trying to get the thing going. And they can see how much passion and love you put into the cars. So it's a really nice, that's why I love classic cars. It's my first time ever going whitewater rafting, and I'm super excited. Truly thrilled to be part of the Alles Trail. We were fan mates. Also, by the way, the guy who came up with the Alles Trail itself, the name is the Right Honourable Mr. Amrit Alles. Currently, Amar has lost his specs on the jet ski. So Kishanka seems to be keeping to typical Sri Lankan timing and seems to have abandoned me for a bit, but... Okay, we're just getting started on the road now. She's just getting some interior shots of the cars, and then we're ready to go. GoPros are all up. And one right here. So here's the thing, I can't take any credit for these cars, for the beautiful machines that I've turned out from them. and the fact that they were located from all over this beautiful island, because that was what my father did. He created this collection. Some of these cars were in the worst possible shape, you know, like we had cars that there was barely a chassis, barely a body. My father would be going around the country, like and when he hears about one of these cars, he has a rumor that there was a car like this. He would go to wherever the village was, wherever the place was, and he would find it and he would buy it and bring it back. And then he would spend maybe a year, 2 years painstakingly restoring this, you know, learning about it in the process. And that's something I've really learned from finally restoring my first car this year as well, is you learn so much about the actual car and you learn so much about the history of it, how everything works in it, you know, the different electronics and what you learn the best is the different problems that will come up with it, because every single classic car has its own problems. And it's diagnosing those, learning how to work around them and how to improve the car as well a little bit. Whenever we went abroad, I remember whenever my family went on holidays, my father would always take us somewhere where there were good classic car places. So when we went to England, me and him would be going to different parts and different spare parts dealers and wreckers, going to different yards and finding these little parts that he knew, and he knew so well exactly what parts were needed for which car. So he would go and he would not give up until he found those parts. He would bring them back somehow in his suitcase or wherever he could fit them, somehow bring them back and then build the cars like that. And that's why it's a work of art, but it's also a work of love. This is a 1970 Alfa Romeo 1750 GTV. I've owned this car for 6 years now, and it was, when I was growing up, it was my favorite car. It was my dream car. I loved it very much, and I was very fortunate to be able to have one in my collection. This car was raced by my dad at Katukurunda several times. There are several amazing stories of this car racing against legends like Rohan De Silva in his Lotus. One of my favorite things about this car is the sound, and it just sounds beautiful. I love how the sound comes from the front, from the engine, not from the rear and the exhaust like in new cars. As you can tell from the sweat on me, there's no air conditioning in here, there's no power steering, manual gearbox, and rear wheel drive. It's the perfect setup for anyone that loves cars. This is a Triumph TR3. It is a British sports car, and it is very much loved by car enthusiasts because of the driving experience. It's very loud, it's very raw. We have these things called drum brakes. It's the predecessor to the normal disc brakes that you see in cars nowadays, and you have to really stamp on them, and even then you have to use the gearbox to slow the car down. And as a result of which, they're a bit dangerous, but they're amazing to drive, and they're just beautiful cars and they sound great. And this particular car is what my father used to race in Katukurunda in the 1980s, and it has won several trophies, again with several legends such as Clive De Silva Sr., who also has a similar car to this. And there are so many beautiful pictures and videos of these cars going full speed in the wet back in the day. And there's a very iconic picture of my dad holding on to the side of the car, because this car only has a lap belt, no seat belt from here. So he's holding on to the side of the car and taking the corner at full speed. And I just memories like that and like pictures you see like that of these cars are what makes them so special. So as I said earlier, the TR3 only has drum brakes. So when you're driving one of these cars and you want to stop, as you do, you first of all do the usual thing and you step on the brake pedal. If that's not stopping you fast enough, you can jump on the gears and you can downshift real quick. And then that should slow you down a little bit more. But if you want to slow down really quickly, there's a little brake here called the auxiliary brake, and you just pull it. And then it's like a handbrake, but it'll slow your car down much faster. And these older cars all had this. So this is a Citroën 2CV, or in France they call it the Deux Chevaux. And it was a really iconic car that was built for over several decades in France because of its practicality and its comfort. This car has an incredible suspension, as you can tell. It's just so comfortable over any bumps, and I don't need to tell you about Sri Lankan roads, it's very useful sometimes. And so basically the car was originally designed to take farmers' eggs over through like a field without breaking them. And at the time there were no cars that had a suspension that was good enough to do that. So that was what this car was for. And if you read Tintin, and I know I did as a child, you ever see Thompson and Thompson? They used to drive one of these cars, and when they used to stop, their hats would come out of the roof. So to maintain cars like this, I'd say the most important thing is you need to run them. You need to drive them, you need to run them, and that's a bit of a problem for me because sometimes I don't spend a lot of time. I'm always between here and Australia. So basically the cars every single week, they are started, they're cleaned, they're moved around a little bit, they're driven, and then when I come, I'll take them for long drives. I just drove the MGA convertible to Nuwara, which was quite a adventurous drive. I just took the W123 wagon to Bentota. Those long drives, only when you come back from them do you realize how much of a difference it makes to the car to have them driven and have them used. Because if they're not used, the brake lines will seal out, will get really sludged, and the brakes will get stuck. Then the engines will seize the different. So that's on one hand, that's to keep the cars running. To maintain the cars and to sort of stop them from declining, the other problem you have is rust. So the cars have to be kept in a dry place, sealed off with minimum moisture, so nowhere near the sea. Those sorts of things it's crazy because the metal on these cars is very old, and there's exposed metal around that can rust. And that's one of the things that kills so many, there were so many beautiful cars in Sri Lanka that are no longer. You don't hear about them. I meet so many uncles who tell me, oh, this car used to be there, that car used to be there. And you can't believe that these cars were there in Sri Lanka and now they're just disappeared, gone, because of rust. They've just rusted the ground, and that's the thing. For a long period of time in Sri Lanka and around the world, there was classics were a very underappreciated thing. So because of that, a lot of these cars were allowed to just decline and then just went to the ground. From my friends, they're usually like, "Machang, you're crazy. Why are you driving a car this old? Why is it's got some of them have no seat belts, some of them and most of them have no power steering, no air conditioning." things like that, and they are like, you're crazy for doing it, especially because I love doing long drives. That's something I love doing. I love taking a car and going for like hours and hours, finding it might even break down somewhere. That's all part of the experience for me. I just love it. And that's sort of part of you feel so much more involved in these cars, because you know that not anyone can drive them, not anyone can look after them. It takes a lot of learning, a lot of practice, and a lot of patience to deal with these cars. But it's so worth it, because it gives you so much happiness when you see something that you've put so much effort into, working so well, and that goes on to the reactions I get from strangers and from people on the street, is they generally just love to just see these cars, because these cars are beautiful in a way that is not found in cars today. A lot of cars today, you wouldn't call them beautiful. You call them very fast, very aggressive looking, they look good, but they wouldn't say they're beautiful. And these cars are just beautiful, and you can see people point and smile. People don't point and be like, or like, people are like, and then the way they because the way they sound, the way they look. People on the road, even to the most part, people on the road respect you as well. Like, there's been several times when I've gotten stuck in the middle of the road, and like initially someone will horn, but then they realize that the car's broken down, and they'll be like, oh no, it's okay, Machang, we understand, it's okay. Like, they're very understanding, they're quite nice. But then there's the people on the other side. I get a lot of people who try to, they see you in an old like sports car, and they think they need to race you. And that's a very weird, it's a bit strange. And that's around the world, that's not here, that's not just here. And you're not going to race them because your car is about 50 years old. It's probably, you try to flow it off the lights, it's going to overheat, it's going to, God knows what's going to happen, you don't know how good the brakes are. So that's another interesting reaction that you get when you drive classic cars, is people try to like, someone will just come and rev the engine and try to, and then like when the light goes green, they'll hammer off, thinking that you're going to race them. But it's just, no, it's not what classic cars are for. As for my relatives, I think it's a very positive reaction, because what they see with me, both me and my brother, who also helps. We maintain the cars together, is that they see a lot of my father in it, in the two of us, and I think they really enjoy the nostalgia and reliving Freddie Alles, who was our father. Because he used to be exactly the same, learning, when he was younger as well, he was learning, he was just getting these cars together, he was putting his heart and soul into them, and he can see, and they see me and my brother doing exactly the same thing, We're also learning, we're also trying, continue this passion that he has, this amazing work that he has built up. And I think they get a lot, our relatives and everyone really that knew my father get a real sense of nostalgia and happiness from seeing that we have also taken that interest on, and we respect and love his memory for that. I want to have had experiences with all of these cars, a trip, an expedition, something like that. And I think that's my plan with the collection, is to bring it up to prepare, and even to prepare it for these trips, of course, takes a lot of time, effort, and more than anything, also trial and error. So I think that's something I really want to do, is travel with these cars around Sri Lanka, and sort of, because it's also something my dad loved to do. He, back in, I think it was 2005, we drove a Triumph TR3, an MGA, and an MG TD. These are all cars from the 1950s and 60s. We drove them up to Nuwara and raced them at Mahagastota. And my dad also drove a 1916 Hupmobile from Colombo to Kandy. And that's a car that I mean, you're looking at it now as a 104-year-old car. So I love doing long trips like that, and because it also, yeah, and getting the cars up to the standard where they're capable of doing trips like that.